Hi, my name is Joe and I run games, and the game that I am running today is Draw Steel specifically. This is the campaign diary for my Draw Steel campaign called A Study in Effluence. When last we left our heroes, we were on our way to... I gotta go check the video and find out where we were when last we left our heroes. Okay, I got it! When last we left our heroes, we were on our way to the Tedius farm. We had stayed overnight at the Chipata farm. Big party. And the PCs, the next day, get up, have another breakfast that can't be beat, head off to the Tedius farm. Secundus Tedius has been having visions, very similar to the visions that Sister Amelia was having. Will Secundus Tedius also empty out on the inside? Stick around to find out. As we begin yet another study into Effluence. So we head to the Tedius farm, and immediately the PCs make their way right to the front door of this boring-ass farm, and they knock upon the boring door. Is that an outhouse? Hold on. Spoilers. Yeah, that's more like it. The PCs head to the Tedius's boring farmhouse. They knock upon the door, and are greeted by a woman. Not really a woman, a young woman, an older girl, something in the vicinity of 16, 17. And she asks what they're there for, and of course they say, "We are here to speak about Secundus." And then the girl turns around and wails, "Mom!" At which point in time, we meet Tertia Tedius. Tertia Tedius comes to the door with the child at her breast, literally at her breast. She has to stop because she comes to see what's up with the girl, and then is like, "Oh, visitors," and has to, she steps back a little bit and asks what they're there for. Pleasantries are exchanged. The PCs drop their bona fides, which is to say, "We helped over at the Chipata farm and we stopped by your place a couple of weeks ago to send for a healer. Remember us?" And they were like, "Yeah, I remember you." And so the PCs are like, "We'd like to talk about your son. We'd like to talk about what's going on. Your eldest son, as it were." And the woman says, "Y'all mean Secundus?" And Marta's like, No, I mean your eldest son, like the first one." And she's like, "Yeah, that's Secundus." And Marta does some quick math and is like, I don't understand. Isn't there a Primus?" And she's like, "Yep, that's my husband." Anyway, weird naming aside, she tells the PCs that Secundus is out helping his dad inspect the pigs. And the PCs make their way out to the pig field, and of course Secundus is out there with his dad. Secundus, the PCs recognize, they had seen him a couple of weeks ago. The dad is older, a little graying around the temples, but basically a wiry beanpole farmer guy. And basically, they're out there inspecting pigs, and as Primus inspects the pigs and gives them the thumbs up, he sends them over to Secundus and says, "Put the paint on," and Secundus puts some paint on the backs of the pigs. That's it, right on the butts. And then they send the pigs on their way, on to the next pig. This appears to be some sort of regular checkup the pigs get, and so far the PCs don't see anything weird about the pigs. And they talk to Principus about Secundus, what's been going on. And he says, "Well, sometimes the boy gets up early. That's been his habit since he was littlin'. And he'll have to go relieve himself a little bit. So he'll get up and he'll leave the house and he'll head out to the privy. And then sometimes he makes his way back to the house and sometimes he don't. And we'll catch him wandering around the edge of the property, and sometimes he's a-talking to himself, and sometimes he's a-talking to the pigs, and sometimes he's a-talking to no one. But he does seem like he's been getting worse." The PCs talk to Secundus, and at the moment, he seems to know a reasonable number of things about pigs. He knows some stuff about this farm. That seems to be about all he knows. He doesn't remember many of his friends from in town or any of his friends from in town. He doesn't really know what's going on he can't answer a lot of basic questions. He can tell you what the season is. He can tell you what the weather's like. He's not clear on how many moons there are. He doesn't know what country he's in, doesn't know who the president is. Nobody knows who the president is. There's not a president of Thessalon. You get it, though. And so the PCs are like, well, seems to be this thing happens around 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning. So we'll finish up inspecting the farm today, have dinner with the Tedius family, and stick around, see if anything happens around 4 in the morning. So they have what amounts to the most boring dinner ever with the Tedius family. These people think that salt is a spicy seasoning. And to be clear, the PCs really drill into them a little bit. They're like, what do you feed him? Show me your spice rack. Show me your medicine cabinet. Where do you keep your stuff? Where's your this and that? They look through his room. They check every inch of this place. They really do their damnedest to figure out what's going on here. Nothing in the house really stands out. There is, when they are directed out to the pig barn, it's the one with the chickens in it. Of course it is. So when they head out to the pig barn, they find very little, but I will say this. Marta rolls a crit on her barn searching. Well, you got to respect the crit. So she finds a journal that Secundus Tedius had been keeping up there. A journal, maybe a little smoke box. Maybe he comes up here to sneak a smoke every once in a while from his parents. But also, he has been writing poems up here, and they are bad. And of course, getting worse over time. But one of the last things that he wrote in that book is, I have seen glory. And then nothing else. So the PCs wait. They wait until about 4 o'clock in the morning. Secundus Tedius gets up, makes his way to the outhouse, uses the facilities. He seems a little timid about it, and then he goes back inside. Well, they were told this thing doesn't happen every day. It looks like maybe the PCs are going to settle in for the long haul. But I got to tell you, when you say to a bunch of PCs, how long would you guys like to spend at this incredibly boring house that is about 3 hours from your home? The answer is not that long. So they're like, well, we can come back tonight. Let's go into town and do some stuff. That's fine. But it's worth teaching some storyteller lessons here. What I should have, I think, said more clearly to the PCs is, well, this happens about every 4 or 5 days. Then I think it would have been very clear, instead of sometimes, then it would have been, I think, more clear to them, oh, we've got a wait ahead of us. We should plan for that. But instead, they just set up shop expecting the adventure to happen, which is reasonable, but also I didn't want them to get there and on day 1, the thing happens. What are the odds? About 20%. So maybe I could have rolled for it. Anyway, they go back into town thinking they're going to do some more investigation. Okay. The first thing that happens is that Marta goes back to her shop, checks on her granddaughter, finds out that the magistrate has been in private meetings for a few days, so her granddaughter has actually been keeping the shop open, and there's a backlog of business. Yay! Now, Marta got a few names from Secundus's mother of friends of Secundus's in town. I'm not going to tell you guys what those names are. You don't care. You only care about one of them. Her name is Cleo. But I will say that what I did was I gave Marta 3 names, and 2 of them were wrong. Because I don't know if you've ever asked somebody's mom who their friends are, but she doesn't always know. So she gave Marta 3 names that were close, and then when she went back, so Marta asks Estella about these kids. And they have the expected back and forth. She's like, what do you think of Cledo Cortos? And Estella's like, who? And she's like, I don't know, someone that's friends with Cleo. And she's like, do you mean Pedro Danman? And Marta's like, maybe. It goes on like that for a while. But she does know that Secundus Tedius is obsessed with Cleo Tanner. He has a huge crush on Cleo Tanner. So that's good to know, right? Okay, awesome. Secundus Tedius, by the way, the PCs didn't want to leave him by himself. They took him into town. Maybe someone in town could be helpful. So he's basically sitting on the front porch at Marta's shop, just sort of watching people go by like the village idiot. That's kind of what he does all day. Marta and Estelle have this really lovely moment where Marta sort of apologizes and is like, I'm not really good at feelings. I'm not really good at talking about stuff. I don't know if your mom was any good at it, but I'm hoping that I can do better. So you just let me know what you need. And Estelle tells her, mom wasn't good at it either. When she needed someone to talk to about her feelings, she went to talk to her dad. And she tells Marta, you're doing okay. It's fine. Don't worry about it. Okay. That was a pretty nice moment. Vanish, of course, goes to talk to Kinch, see if he knows anything about the Tedius farm. He doesn't. Not really. I mean, these people pay their taxes. It's not his thing, really. Corinne looks into some herbal remedies. She maybe goes and talks to Siobhan a little bit about occulty stuff, but truth be told, they just don't have enough information to work off of yet. And eventually, it starts to get late. They head back to the Tedius farm, but before they leave, Estelle hits up Marta one more time and says, I think something is seriously, seriously wrong with this guy. And Marta's like, why? And she says, well, while we were sitting on the front porch, Cleo Tanner walked right past him, and he did not twitch. Like there was not even the barest glimmer of recognition. Ooh. Back at the Tedius farm, Marta sets herself up in the hayloft of the pig barn. Vanish and Corinne set themselves up on the roof, and Titus puts himself basically up sort of around where the outhouse is, but up a hill a little bit, closer to like where their windmill and their grindstone is located. And they just wait to see what happens. Night 2 is the magic night. Secundus Tedius, at about 4:35 o'clock in the morning, goes out to the outhouse, does his tedious business. He can be heard from inside the outhouse saying, is anybody out there? Hearing no response, he exits the outhouse, sort of mumbling a little bit. And that is when this glow begins, sort of in between the outhouse and the windmill. Bright enough that the PCs cannot at first see what is going on. And there is this song that sort of rises up around them. And as they watch, this glorious winged angel descends from the sky and begins speaking to Secundus Tedius. The angel speaks in words that none of them can recognize, though Secundus does seem to hear what's going on. And this is when the PCs move into action. So first things first, Marta is hauling ass in that direction. Titus is hauling ass in that direction. Corinne is carefully getting down from the roof. Vanish is chucking knives at an angel, just right out the gate. Whoop, whoop, whoop. And of course, the angel taking damage is now shocked as shit. And the angel begins to speak into their minds, sort of one by one. And over the course of this combat, the angel speaks to, I think, almost everyone. None of the PCs understand the words coming out of its mouth.
Do you understand the words that are coming out of my mouth?
But if the angel is looking at them and speaking to them, it sort of puts the words directly into their mind as a type of song. And it says things like,
Do you hope for the serpent to rise? All true sons and daughters of Thessalon hope for the serpent to rise.
Or,
Don't trust the water. It's got things growing in it. I need the water more than you do. I am becoming something that you cannot possibly imagine.
Or,
Are we dreaming? We are dreaming. Is this your dream or my dream?
and then my favorite,
You make me so happy. I feel like I've known you for 1,000 years. I feel like everything in my existence has been leading me to this point. You are the piece that my soul has been missing.
bonus points if you understand where any of those references came from. We don't have to do the blow-by-blow for this thing, but I want to talk through the angel a little bit. And I'm going to throw in just a little bit of design here. For a much deeper dive into the design, come check out my Planning the Game video after this. Basically, the angel's a solo. It gets 2 actions per round. It has villain actions. That's the deal. It's essentially got a signature attack and a maneuver. The signature attack does a bunch of psychic damage, and then dazed save ends. It's got dumb potency on it. If it rolls incredibly well on that, you either lose one skill or you advance on the sanity track. I never got to use that, which makes me so sad. I think I only took one skill from one person. Its maneuver is called Bright Song. It's a 10 burst. Each creature in that 10 burst is slid 3 squares, ignoring stability, because essentially they are swaying and moving to the Song of the Angel. Neat. It had some other cool stuff, but that's pretty much it. Villain actions were pretty similar. One of my favorite things on the villain actions was especially the first one. The target must choose between taking 5 psychic damage or being dazed, save ends. That was cool. That's an awesome thing to make the PCs choose. I love that moment. The second villain action was everybody takes 5 psychic damage and anyone facing the angel is blinded, save ends. There's not a blinded condition in Draw Steel, by the way. So what I said is you just can't use your sight to gain line of effect until you're not blind. That was easy as pie. And basically what that meant is the only PC that got blinded, I think, was Vanish. And it just meant that he stormed the angel until he tripped over it and was like, well, I got line of effect now. That was pretty cool. And then Villain Action 3 was the one that took skills. I'm not going to like drop more spoilers, but I will say that I think this design was missing something. First off, it was missing just the ability to do something that didn't create a condition. So I was constantly like, you're dazed again, you're dazed again, you're dazed again. And that's fine, I guess. But it got a little one note. I would have liked a trigger in there, even if the trigger isn't that big a deal. I just didn't have one. But I think most importantly, almost everything this creature did pushed people back. And like it had a wing maneuver that pushed people back. It had a bright song maneuver that pushed people back. And what that meant is every round I'm like, well, all right, I guess now it's the end of my turn. I push you guys away. And, you know, it was just a yo-yo game a little bit. And that also felt a little one note. And I feel like I could have done something more interesting with it next time. Over the course of this fight, one of the things that became clear was that, and occasionally when the PCs were in the right position or at the right angle, I would give them essentially intuition rolls for free to be like, do you see something weird happening with this angel? And eventually they did. Not all of them saw it, but one of them saw it very clearly right towards the end, that the angel had on its back this translucent sort of long channel that just went straight up into the sky and disappeared. And it was big around, like it plugged into the angel's back somehow. Not a cord, but what it was an incredibly long finger with like dozens and dozens of double jointed knuckles that moved in multiple directions. Crack, 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 crack. Bonus points if you understand that reference too. I love that. It's super creepy. I love the fact that it was sort of like disappearing into the ether. That was all good stuff. I do want to throw out one thing that happened at the end here, though, because I thought it was pretty cool. You know, this went the way a lot of our fights with big things go. Vanish got off the setup, and then we were just doing tons of extra damage to this thing. Once they figured out that it was weak to corruption damage, it was over. And basically, what this fight came down to at the end was, you know, are you guys going to be able to finish this angel off, or is it going to get extracted from this scene by that giant fuck off finger, right? Tedius tackles this thing, gets on it to try to keep it away from Secundus, at which point in time it starts, you know, going up, flying upward. Tedius was blind at the time, so he's just going up like, oh, I have no idea how high I am right now. So he just let go of the angel and let himself fall. And I think he fell like 7 squares or something. Both Marta and Corinne ended up going after this thing by getting up and like jumping off the top of the outhouse, which was pretty badass. Marta jumped up and sort of like tagged it with a Super Mario power up kind of thing, using, I think, gravimetric strike to like punch it down. Nulls are cool. And Corinne got up there and used, I think, did psychic damage, not to the angel, but to this giant fucking finger thing coming off its back. And essentially, you know, the angel still took that damage, but narratively what happened is that instead of this finger hauling a dead angel up into the sky, which would have been a cool image. She shattered that chunk of the finger and the angel fell. And Marta's like, nuh-uh, I'm going to catch that thing. And I was like, okay, here's what's going to happen. You're going to make a roll on this. And if you get a tier 1 result, you missed it. If you get a tier 2 result, you're going to catch it, and you are both going to take the falling damage from this angel impacting you. And if you get a tier 3 result, you get to choose who takes the falling damage. And Marta's like, yeah, that's fair. Y'all, she rolled another crit. This is my wife, you guys. She rolls dice like Will Wheaton.
Will Wheaton.
But not in this adventure. On this adventure, she was on fire. So I'm like, well, once again, gotta respect the crit. So I'm like, okay, what happens is you catch the angel. Neither of you takes additional damage. But here's the thing. The angel's already dead. I gotta throw something out there. So the angel said one more thing. And this was the first thing the angel said that wasn't complete nonsense. She said, what is dead may live again. Hail Belanovos. And then she faded away and dissolved into her component parts, which Marta is holding. And it ends up being like a bolt's worth of very fine silk, a few long strands of flesh, just skin, like fatty flesh. And they were like 5-6 feet long, kind of bluish, and a bunch of feathers. It is like, you ever play Lego Fortnite? Yeah. When you break a monster and it just blows up into its treasure. It's literally what happened with this angel. It just turned into its component parts because it was no longer being animated. There was no magic being used to keep it together. And that was a very weird fucking moment for my PCs. Moment of silence for the angel. The angel of wings. We hardly knew you. But you said some very weird shit. So then, my PCs made a flurry of rolls. They're like, what on earth could all of this mean? And the good news is that Corinne has exactly the right skills to figure a lot of this stuff out. And what they pieced together is this. I'll go slow for those of you who have not read the proprietary religion document that is not available to the public. Those of you who were here last time know that Brati Vasili is the god of death and the underworld and the murderer of the gods. He is the brother to Niobe and Orianos. And as the story goes, the first god that Brato Vasili murdered, the reason he is called the murderer of the gods is because he murdered Belanovos. Agni Belanovos. The earth before the earth. Before Orianos was the earth father, Belanovos was the world. And this is, of course, a story in the vein of other religious stories. Think of this like, the Olympians slaying the Titans. It's that kind of thing. Nobody believes that Belanovos was the physical world, and then when it was slain, it was swapped out for another one. And even priests do not believe that happened. Even priests are like, no, I'm sure if you had been alive back then, you wouldn't have noticed. You might have noticed something, but it's not like they would have swapped the ground out underneath you real quick. That isn't how it happened. It's a conceptual death, but it's a death nonetheless. And Belanovos is the only god in that pantheon, really, who is known for having hosts of angels in service to them. The idea of angels in Thessalon comes from ancient worship of Belanovos, ancient stories of Belanovos. And, the angels in Thessalon, basically the same as the angels in this world, which is to say, wings, trumpets, you get the idea. But Belanovos is a dead god, so what's that mean? Well, the PCs don't know, but they do have what is left of an angel, so they pack it up, they take it back to town. The first thing they do when they get there is they go to the temple of Ekos Timos and they talk to Father Juna Dunaman. They were expecting that they would wake him up, but when they get there, Father Juna Dunaman has a table laid out in the front of his worship area, and he is tending to a body. Now, obviously, he covers it up as the PCs come in, but I imagine that their reactions might have been something like, holy shit, not another one. By which I mean, we got one healer in this town. If this one is fucking with dead bodies too, that's a problem. But also, when they walked in the door, Juna Duneman sees them. And of course, he knows who these people are. So his first thought is, oh, please tell me there's not another dead body. So they basically have exactly the same reaction. Basically, Vanish walked in the door, and there's this exchange between the two of them, and then Vanish had to excuse himself so he could go laugh outside. They reconvene back in Juna Duneman's area, and they're like, well, Father, I hate to ruin your night even further, but we have something very weird here. And the two groups begin to exchange information. PCs first. They're like, holy shit, we killed an angel. Look, it dropped loot. And Juna Duneman's like, I have no idea what that's about. He and Corinne talk a little bit about Belanovos. Basically, they exchange their notes on that story I just told you. And Juna Duneman's opinion is very similar to, what I said there. He's like, yes, that's a story. And despite being a priest, he basically believes that a lot of these stories are just stories, right? They're just fictionalized accounts of what the gods are doing. He doesn't necessarily think the stories that we have are literal, even though he literally believes in the gods, because he's like, why? Like, the gods didn't come down and tell us this stuff, right? Lots of priests wrote this stuff down. I'm sure we've got stuff wrong. I'm sure we've got stuff right. He doesn't actually have much in the way of insight as far as what this could mean, but he does tell them what he knows about angels, which isn't much. However, while talking to Father Duneman, what they do sort of come to realize is both of these visitations were happening at religious shrines. Nobody really thought about it, but when they checked out the outhouse later, which was easy to do because after Marta and an angel and Corinne were both on the roof, that fucking thing collapsed. So there was plenty of light. While they were inspecting the outhouse later, one thing they noticed is that there was a little shrine in there. There was an old prayer book, not with pages missing. That's what the almanac is for. There was a little prayer book, and there was a little statue of Potus Dorianus. Dorianus is a child god. He's sort of a god of celebrations. If I'm being perfectly honest, he's a little bit like, he's not really a super appropriate god for kids to worship. He's more like Pan meets Dionysus, but in the body of an 8-year-old kid. However, kids love Dorianus, and he is exactly the sort of statue that you might, as a parent, put in the outhouse if, say, you have children who are afraid to go out there at night. Odds are good that when the Secundus children were little, they put that thing out there and just never removed it. It became a fixture in the outhouse. So the one thing they have in common, at least, is little shrines and sort of ritualized activities. But as Father Duneman pointed out, this wasn't happening last season. This wasn't happening last year. Almost every house in this city has a shrine. So, it's not happening here in the city. It's happening in the outskirts. But almost all those houses also have shrines. So we don't, we sort of know what these things have in common. We know what to look for, but we don't really know yet. Tune into my game planning video and we can talk more about it. Marta's interested in what the most respectful way to dispose of these remains are. Father Duneman thinks burn him or bury him. Normal priest stuff. He used to serve the god of earth, so you could put him in the earth. And the PCs were like, isn't that disrespectful? And he's like, it's the same earth, guys. Just put him in the dirt. He offers to burn it, but the PCs decide that they're going to bury the thing themselves, try to be as respectful as possible. Corinne keeps a couple of those feathers for alchemical reasons. But then they're like, hey, what's going on with this body on the table? And so he shows them the body on the table. When they came into town 2 days prior, yesterday, whichever day it was, one of the things they learned is that there had been another disappearance. There was obviously that half a horse thing that got torn apart. There was the town drunk that went missing. Nobody ever really thinks that's too suspicious. I mean, maybe that dude just walked into the river. But also, there was a man, we learned this from Kitsch, there was a man named Fernan Calvo who sort of panicked. He had been with a sex worker, a boy. Nobody knew the boy's name. Boy, I mean, he was a man, but like, I don't mean a child. I mean like a young man. But he was with a young man. Nobody knew. He was with a twink. Let's be honest. Nobody knew his name at the time. But according to him, some monster had taken the boy, and of course, he wasn't being very forthcoming with details because Fernan Calvo has a wife and a couple of kids and doesn't want to talk about what he was doing in an alley with a young man in the middle of the night. So Kitch had been sort of looking at that from a blackmail perspective, but now that there is a body here, we know a little bit more. The body belonged to a young man named Bowman. He worked at a local brothel, although Father Duneman thinks that he was doing sort of extracurricular work, because obviously this wasn't in the brothel proper. This was, in an alley near the brothel. And our friend Gregory, the young boy who has a crush on Marta, brought him in. Gregory found him behind the butcher's shop. That butcher who, stripped a dead horse in about 2 minutes. And that is noteworthy because Bowman's body has also been stripped of the juicy bits. Most of the major muscles were cut off. The heart is missing, the liver is missing, the kidneys are missing. A lot of the bones are there, a lot of the connective tissue is there. And so it really looks like maybe somebody carved this guy up like a Thanksgiving roast. Or, as Marta had suggested, maybe someone's making a body. Now that, under ordinary circumstances, would have been the end of it. Except that Vanish thought to ask me if there were tons of ghosts in here. He's like, they do funerals and stuff like that. There's probably got to be a lot of ghosts in here, right? Well, there aren't a lot of ghosts in here. Just one. The body of a young man standing over by his own corpse. And so Vanish turns around and he rolls on the communicate and gets like one question. And he doesn't want Father Duneman to know that he can speak with the dead. So he says to Father Duneman, Father, what would you ask this boy if you could ask him one question? Father Duneman says, that's a trap. Because I am not one thing, I am two things. I am a priest, and I am also a man who lives here. And as a priest, I would want to know, do you have any wishes for your body? Is there anything that we can do to help you carry on to the next life? But as a man who lives here, I would want to ask who killed him. And Vanish said, I would also want to ask who killed him. And that is the question that Vanish asked of this ghost. And the ghost said, he was so big, Lord Magpie, so much bigger than me and strong and fast. And he took me and he leapt away and he climbed until we were very high. And then he broke me. And then there was cutting and there was tearing of flesh, and I ran far from that. I ran until I couldn't run anymore. I ran until I lost my way. And when I found my way again, I was here by my body. And that is where we ended our study in Effluence. If that was interesting, stick around. I do this all the time. I have 2 going on 4 books written in this particular setting. So if you like the setting and you're interested in that, you can pop on over to crownsforgotten.com. The first book is up for free. It goes up 1 chapter at a time, once a month. And it's almost done. So you can read basically the whole thing online for free. And if you're not interested in waiting to read the whole thing online for free, you can buy it. Don't let me stop you. The second book is going to go up 1 chapter at a time once the first one is done, which will be, I want to say November or something like that. Happy birthday to me. If this sounded cool and you want to play Draw Steal yourself, there will be a link in the doobly-doo to MCDM's website where you can get Draw Steal. It's cool. You guys, there's so much cool stuff for Draw Steel out right now. I can't even talk. Like, there's so much cool stuff. There's new classes coming out all the time. There's tons and tons. There's so much third-party content. It's a really exciting time to be a fan of Draw Steel. And if you liked this idea, but you thought, I don't know, that seems a little too pulp for me. That seems a little too adventure-oriented for me. Have I got good news for you? Because Crows is going to drop any day now, and Crows is kind of like this, but with more death and less beating ass. It's basically a survival dungeon crawler that is city-based, and it uses a very similar resolution mechanic. It's going to be cool. I think that one's in open beta right now, so check it out. That's all I got. So I will catch you guys next time.